let's finish the show today talking about the winners and losers from the 2021 NFL Draft. We've had a couple days to digest everything. I've had some time to really figure out how I feel about all the teams' draft selections and how they did over that 3-day span. And I think I've found some good winners and some bad losers for the 2021 NFL Draft. So let's have some fun here. Let's just relax and talk winners and losers. And I'm interested to hear your winners and losers as well. I've got about 5 winners and 6 to 7 losers, so let's go ahead and get into it, starting with the winners. And the first winner that I have is Kyle Trask. And if you don't know who Kyle Trask is, he was selected in the second round by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with the approval of Tom Brady, of course. Kyle Trask, a quarterback coming out of University of Florida. He was a Heisman candidate at one point. I think he finished 4th this past season in Heisman voting. And the reason that Kyle Trask is such a winner is that Kyle Trask is very gifted athletically. He's 6'5", 240 pounds. He's got a cannon for an arm. He's more of that traditional, very strong in the upper body, really great arm quarterback, not more of the more mobile quarterback that we're kind of seeing the trend shift to in the NFL. But the real knock on Kyle Trask was the fact that he just had horrible decision making, very bad decision maker, often threw into double and triple coverage at his time at University of Florida. So with his biggest negative being his decision making and his inability to read defense as well, I can't think of a better quarterback and a better team for him to sit on than him sitting behind Tom Brady in Tampa Bay, which Tom Brady being one of the best, if not the best decision making quarterbacks in the NFL, and probably the greatest quarterback of all time until 50 years from now when somebody better comes along. Who knows? I think that's a perfect marriage. It's a perfect place for Kyle Trask to sit and learn and fix his biggest con, which again is his decision making. That makes him an absolute winner. So good for you, Kyle Trask. He's probably would be in consideration for one of the quarterbacks to have the best landing spot out of all the quarterbacks taken in this draft. The second winner is the Miami Dolphins. It's really time to give Brian Flores the credit that he is due down in Miami, and Chris Grier as well, the general manager, for the quickness and the speed and the effectiveness in which the Miami Dolphins have been able to rebuild since Brian Flores became head coach. They've done a fantastic job, and they had a really, really good draft. Got a great tight end and offensive tackle in the second or third round. They got a fantastic safety. Their 2 first-round picks, Jalen Waddle, who is a speedster. He is the AFC East version of Tyreek Hill. He's going to be an absolute playmaker for the Dolphins, and Tua Tagovailoa. And then Jalen Phillips at number 18. A great story. He had to retire due to medical concerns at UCLA, came back, played at University of Miami, and now he gets to stay in the same stadium and play for the Miami Dolphins. They had a great draft, and they've got even more good draft picks coming up in the next year or so. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the Dolphins contending for the first place spot in the AFC East. They've had a great group of draft. Third winner in the winners and losers for the 2021 NFL Draft is Ryan Pace. Ryan Pace probably saved his job on Thursday night when he drafted Justin Fields at number 11. Sure, they had to give up a haul to get him. Ryan Pace is still in trouble, but I think he probably saved his job for at least another season, maybe another season and a half, because Justin Fields, as I've talked about on the show already today, is probably the best quarterback suited for the Chicago Bears and what they need right now. And that system and the defense and the mentality that Chicago Bears team has, I think Justin Fields is probably the only quarterback that would have been able to go to Chicago and be mentally prepared for the tough tasks that he has ahead of him. Ryan Pace, big winner, probably saved his job, and he probably saved the job of his head coach, Matt Nagy, as well. Fourth winner is Justin Herbert. The Chargers had Rashawn Slater essentially just fall into their laps, and Justin Herbert had Rookie of the Year, obviously, fantastic season, incredible display of passing ability, and it's going to be really interesting to see what he can do with an actual offensive line in front of him. Rashawn Slater, probably one of the top 2 tackle prospects in this year's draft, and he can also slide to guard as well. Justin Herbert's got to be a happy man. Chargers can be really contending for a spot in the playoffs this season behind Kansas City. And the last winner is the Cleveland Browns, who had a fantastic draft as well. I tried to include only 2 teams in terms of just being general winners, and I went with the Dolphins and the Browns. The Browns had Newsome II out of Northwestern fall to them at 26. They were able to capitalize and get Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and in the second round after he fell out of the first round. And I had Owusu-Koramoah actually mocked to the Dolphins and going relatively high in the first round. So to see him fall to the second and have the Browns get a coverage linebacker, which they absolutely needed and were exposed for not having in their divisional playoff game against the Kansas City Chiefs, great pickup by the Browns. They had a great draft, and that team really, as well as the Dolphins, has turned around, and I would not be surprised if the Browns have a really big shot at the Super Bowl this year. Now going into the fun part where we make fun of some teams for their awful decisions and make fun of a couple of other things that came out of the NFL draft. First is the Las Vegas Raiders. I always call them the Oakland Raiders there momentarily. This is like the third or fourth year in which the Oakland Raiders have just made a mind-boggling reach with their first-round pick. I think they drafted Clelin Ferrell 2 years ago, and he's only gotten 6 sacks in 2 seasons when he was supposed to be one of the best pass rushers from that draft. In this draft, the Raiders moved up, or excuse me, they didn't move up, but they kind of jumped ahead in themselves. They drafted Alex Leatherwood at 17 when Leatherwood was mocked to be a second or third rounder, and there was still Christian Darrisaw available. There were much better tackles. Tevin Jenkins was still available as well. There were much better tackles available, and the Raiders just kind of, I guess they hyper-focused on the guy, and they drafted a real head-scratcher for like the second or third year in a row, and I'm seriously concerned and confused as to why Jon Gruden and Mike Mayock had not been fired yet. If the Raiders have a bad season, again this season, I would imagine that Mayock would be gone. I don't know about Gruden. Gruden has a massive contract, so Raiders are absolute losers again in this draft. Another loser in this draft, Joe Burrow. Again, Bengals fans are going to be mad at me for talking about this, but I will die on this hill, I still think that Penei Sewell should have been drafted by the Bengals with the 5th overall pick. Maybe I should be more specific and say Joe Burrow's leg. That's a loser because he maybe hit a lot again this season. They have an upgraded offensive line, but again, they play in a division with a lot of great defenses. It's going to be very difficult for Joe Burrow to be able to run around the pocket and stay healthy, so I feel really bad for Joe Burrow. They should have taken the tackle. Protecting your quarterback is the most important thing in the NFL. Super, super important, and Joe Burrow just has not gotten that protection. Next loser is the Green Bay Packers. And not because they had a bad draft necessarily. I think Eric Stokes is a better pick than most people would give the Packers credit towards. They needed some cornerback help. Eric Stokes is probably the fastest cornerback in the draft. At least I believe that was the case. And they did get some, wide receiver help in the 3rd round with Amari Rodgers, who I think is going to be a steal. He's a great wide receiver. But the fact that Aaron Rodgers and that whole Aaron Rodgers drama came out the day of the draft just automatically makes them losers. And that's sad because, again, they didn't necessarily have a bad draft, but when you're losing one of the top 4 or 5 quarterbacks to ever play the game, or you're in danger of losing that automatically puts you on the losers list. Then the next loser, it's cell reception. Texans quarterback, the new Texans quarterback, Davis Mills, coming out of Stanford, apparently didn't know that he was drafted by the Houston Texans until he saw his name come up on the board. And I'm guessing that the Houston Texans forgot to call him, which is kind of weird. I don't know if the later round picks get calls from their teams. I would imagine that they would at some point to let them know that they're being drafted, and I guess Davis Mills didn't know that he was being drafted by the Texans until he saw his name on the board, so that's not a good look for the Houston Texans. Next loser, and this is an honorable mention I've decided, are the Jaguars running backs. So you have James Robinson, an undrafted free agent, come into Jacksonville last season and have a 1,000-yard rushing season. And if you're Robinson, you got to think, man, I had a 1,000-yard rushing season. I'm in a good spot. I think I would deserve the starting job. And then Urban Meyer comes in and takes Travis Etienne with the 25th overall pick. And it's like, man, really? I mean, I know running backs are expendable, but this still seems like kind of seems very petty. I don't even know if petty's the right word. I just feel bad for James Robinson. And I also feel bad for Travis Etienne because then Urban Meyer came out and say, yeah, well, we really wanted Kadarius Toney, but the Giants swapped him up at pick number 20. And then, with Travis Etienne saying, oh, well, I want to have a 2-man kind of game with James Robinson. And obvious Travis Etienne has a lot more skills than just being a running back. He's a tremendous pass catcher out of the backfield. And Urban Meyer said as much, and they're going to use him all around the field. But I feel bad for both those running backs. First of all, James Robinson for being kind of pushed out of the way after having a really great season, being an undrafted free agent. And then Travis Etienne coming in and being drafted at number 25, being able to play with his college quarterback. And Urban Meyer basically saying, yeah, well, we really wanted Kadarius Toney, and we're going to basically have a 2-man lightning and thunder approach with the running back situation instead of having Etienne being the featured back, which he can absolutely be a featured back in the NFL. I think using him in just a a way in which he's a running back and also a sweep man, wildcat, whatever. I think it's giving him a lot to do, but I think Travis Etienne had more in mind of being the number one guy. Next loser is the Cowboys, and I hesitated to call the Cowboys losers, which is why I'm also giving them an honorable mention as well. I think I would like to brand the Cowboys as being the unluckiest team in this draft, because not only were both of the top cornerbacks completely taken off the board by the time the Cowboys were, on the clock. They did get Micah Parsons, and they declined the option on Leighton Vander Esch, so I imagine that Micah Parsons is going to replace Vander Esch at some point. But they had both of the top cornerbacks taken off the board at 8 and 9 before they selected. And then in the second round, the Raiders hopped over them to take Trevon Moehrig at a TCU, which they could have definitely used as the safety help. And they had to settle for Kelvin Joseph at cornerback. It felt like the Cowboys were always being jumped over this draft, which I feel bad for Jerry in that essence. So it's not like they had a bad draft. They did the best of what they could with it. They did have some stretches and some reaches in the second or third round, but again, they were always being jumped over. So I felt like the Cowboys were really unlucky this draft. And then the last loser for the 2021 NFL Draft is Goodell's Lazy Boy. Goodell's Lazy Boy made an appearance in the first round. And that's the lazy boy that he sat in during the 2020 NFL Draft, in which he did it from his basement. And can you imagine the amount of glitter and farts that are now in that lazy boy, considering that 32 NFL fans sat in that couch or sat in that lazy boy for an extended amount of time, and some of them did not look like they were very well washed. I feel bad for Goodell's Lazy Boy. I wouldn't be surprised if they swapped out the Lazy Boy, actually. That would actually, it might not actually be the Lazy Boy, but I feel bad for that couch. And I don't know if you ever have a Lazy Boy, if you've ever owned a Lazy Boy. I'm very possessive, or at least my father was extremely possessive of the Lazy Boy that we had in our household. He wouldn't let anybody else besides family members sit in it, so I don't know if Goodell is the same way, but I feel bad for that Lazy Boy. And that's winners and losers from the 2021 NFL Draft, ladies and gentlemen, and that's the show. Make sure that hey folks, thank you so much for listening to this segment from the Hard-Headed Sports Podcast. If you enjoyed this segment, make sure that you drop a like on the video and a comment. It helps me out a bunch, and if you're interested in watching more segments like this from the show after the show has been completed, you should definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you're interested in listening to the entire show in its full-length entirety, you should listen to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. Once again, thank you so much for watching the video. My name is Nick Ryan, and I will see you all again very soon.